This story was submitted by a viewer who wishes to stay anonymous. So let's get started. A little bit of backstory. Since the age of 8, my mom and dad had drifted apart. He was an alcoholic and always put alcohol before his family. He would spend all night down at the local pub, which happened to be a 5-minute walk away, with all his friends drinking and taking all sorts of drugs. This happened all day, every day. However, he would still get up at 7 a.m. and go to work every day except Sundays. My mom used to go along with whatever he would say and do just to make him happy in fear of what he may do. Some days my mom would visit her friend with me, who lived directly opposite our house, for a catch-up and to have a drink while I played with my mom's friend's children. Some nights we would walk across the road to go back home, and all of my mom's clothes would have been thrown outside of the house, along with all her belongings. This must have happened on at least 4 occasions. We would pick up all of my mom's stuff and place it in her car, and she would have to sleep in my bedroom, which was absolutely tiny, with a single small bed. My mom and dad's bedroom were on the ground floor, and my brothers and my sisters and my room were all on the top floor. My brother and sister were around 8 and 10 years older than me, so they stayed out of the whole relationship drama. I remember one time I was in the kitchen with my dad, while my mom was in the front room watching TV, and he was making 2 drinks of shandy, and I noticed he was crushing pills. Lots of pills, and putting them in one glass and not the other. Instantly, I knew this wasn't medicine for any of them. My dad then takes the drink with the pills, and says, "I made you a shandy, you better drink it," and walked off. Instantly, I said to my mom, "Don't drink it, he put pills in them." So she tips it down the sink and tells him that she drank it. Every 20 minutes or so, he would walk out of the bedroom, pop his head out from the kitchen, check on my mom, and go back into the bedroom. He also did all sorts of other stuff, such as buying matches and covering himself with petrol, and then laying on the gym floor, which was the outbuilding in our garden. Hours later, he came back and showered off. Just before the real bad thing happened, he stole all my mom's gold jewelry, which was passed down through the family, and some jewelry was my mom's great-great-nana's. She was devastated. And please note, my dad had never physically laid hands on my mom, and he had refused to move out unless she gave him 50,000 euros, which, at the time, she didn't have. Now let's get into the real story. I had just turned 11 years old when this had happened. I sat in my living room, watching TV. My mom was in the bath, and my dad was out somewhere. My brother and sister were both out with their friends. It was around 9 p.m. on a winter's day, so it was very dark out. 20 minutes into watching TV, my dad came home, walked to the table, pulled something out of his sleeve, and I looked over and saw a knife. It had a black handle and a blue cover over the blade. I said, "Why do you have that for?" And he replied, "I had to go see someone who I owed a lot of money." I'm very streetwise for my age and knew more than a typical 11-year-old because of my childhood. I knew that my dad was not only drunk, but he was off his head on some type of drug. My dad sat down on the sofa with a knife still on the table behind us and began watching TV. 5 minutes later, my mom walked down in her dressing gown and sat on the sofa as well. Our sofa suite was a single armchair and then a 5-seater chair in which me and my dad were sitting in, while my mom was in the one-piece chair. My dad was in a bad mood from the moment he walked in, and out of the blue began calling my mom names. He would say such things as, "Your mom's a whore, she's a cunt, I hate her," and then things that I won't mention due to the length of this story as it is. My mom became visibly upset and began crying, so I got out of the chair I was in and sat in front of her by her feet while my dad continued calling her all sorts of names for about 10 minutes until she finally had enough and said, "Why don't you just fuck off?" Instantly, I knew this was a bad idea with the state he was in. He jumped up and ran to the table and immediately picked up the knife and ripped off the blue cover and began running towards my mother with the knife aimed right at her. I jumped up and pushed my dad, saying, Please don't kill her! Dad, stop! I could hear my mom screaming, "Don't do this! Not in front of your daughter!" He pushed me to one side and stood over my mom. She was in the seat with her knees up, protecting her stomach and neck. She screamed at me to run, which I did. I ran outside and screamed for help, but nobody came. Then, one of my dad's friends just happened to be walking outside. He heard me and thought I was joking and laughed it off and carried on walking down the road. I ran to go back into the house, and just as I did, my mom ran out the door and said, "Let's go!" She didn't have any shoes or socks, so I was gonna run back and get her some, but she grabbed me and we ran halfway down the road to my aunt's house. She wasn't in, but her husband was, who immediately called the police, even though my mom didn't want to. Within 10 minutes, the whole road was shut off. There were armed police officers and sniffer dogs everywhere. The police smashed down the door and found my dad in the bedroom, door locked, watching TV, as if nothing had happened. They arrested him and began looking for the knife. It turns out he had thrown the knife over the back neighbor's fence, and he really didn't think he would get caught for it. I had to go down to do a video interview at the age of 11, which was terrifying. He began his plea and said that he wasn't guilty, but days later changed it to guilty. All he was granted with was 240 hours of community service, as he didn't physically harm her. In my opinion, he should have been charged with attempted murder. After the community service, he wasn't allowed to see me for 6 months, as we both had an injunction out on him as well as a panic button. However, he went to court and wanted custody of me every other weekend for 1 day. As I was only 11, I didn't get any say in the matter at all, and he was granted to it. So, every other weekend, I would go down there with my brother and sister, and I would have to sit in a pub watching him drink his life away. He would say things such as, "Don't go home on Tuesday after school. I'm petrol bombing the house," and all sorts of other stuff. He lived 30 minutes away, and after that, he went from girlfriend to girlfriend, and I stopped seeing him. Now, I'm 16, and have moved 5 hours away with my mom and stepdad of 5 years, and I'm happier than ever. My dad tries to call me maybe once or twice a year, but I don't answer the phone anymore. I'm through with living like a scared child, and am now living with a great life with all the people I need around me. I spoke to my mom about this incident last week, and she told me that before my mom, my dad had dated another woman through his teenage years and took acid one day and attempted to kill her by strangling her. It just scares me to think what may have happened if I wasn't with my mom that night, or if the door was locked when we ran. This second story was also submitted by a viewer who wishes to remain anonymous. Sorry this is a little long, but it went on for almost a year. This is probably the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. I still don't like to talk about it, even to family. I still experience a lot of anxiety, shame, and guilt whenever I think about it. I'm a 24-year-old female. At the time this happened, I had just graduated college and had bad anxiety. I was very shy and had a hard time standing up for myself. I have epilepsy as well, which is relevant and maybe makes this story a bit unusual. I was broke at the time, so I got a job at a warehouse. I got along with my coworkers. The work wasn't too bad, and the warehouse was near my apartment, which was good because I couldn't drive. There was this guy, Glenn, who was in his mid-50s. He seemed like a pretty normal, all-around nice guy. He was very popular and very friendly to everyone. Looking back, he seemed usually eager to talk to me, but I chalked it up to him just being friendly because I was new. Glenn kept offering to give me rides, which I would always politely decline. The walk to work wasn't bad, but when the winter came around, I finally caved one day and started accepting them. I worked with Glenn for almost 5 months, and felt that I could trust him. He was friends with everyone, and seemed like such a normal guy. I know this was a little dumb on my part, but what can I say? I was naive. At first, everything was fine, but then I started getting very weird vibes. He would bring candy to work and insist that I have some, but refuse to offer it to anyone else. It was just small stuff like this, but it was still odd. But I was beginning to think this guy was pretty weird. I had once told him that I liked Green Day. Don't judge me for that. And when one of their songs came on in the warehouse, he asked me, "Hey, I know you like Green Day. Do you control the radio?" I thought that was weird, but I laughed it off as a joke. Who could believe that, right? Then he started bringing me pieces of cake. I accepted them politely every day, but we had different lunch shifts, so I threw them in the trash without him knowing. Alarm bells were definitely going off, and I still wished I'd listened to them. If I had just given him the cold shoulder, maybe it would have ended there, but I wish I'd just told him to fuck off. But I didn't. I didn't want to hurt his feelings, and I didn't want to look like a bitch in front of my coworkers. I didn't want anyone to know, and again, I had no social skills. I had a lot of trouble standing up for myself. Then, there were some serious red flags. He started sending me creepy text messages on the weekends like, "I miss you, 22 hours and 10 seconds, and I'll be relieved of this awful pain." Then one day, I saw his truck parked in the lot behind my apartment. I know it was his because of his bumper stickers. Whenever I opened the door, the truck would speed away, but it came back several times. That was it. I gathered my courage and told him I didn't want any more rides and wasn't interested in him. I felt proud of myself and thought surely this would be the end of it, but I was very wrong. As I said before, I have epilepsy. It's quite embarrassing to talk about, but it's pretty well controlled, and for the most part, I manage to live a fairly normal life. I don't have seizures often, usually just a couple a year. But I usually prefer to have at least one person around me who is aware of them and knows what to do. I told one coworker who wasn't Glenn about my symptoms. Somehow, this information got back to Glenn. He just started talking to me one day and somehow knew everything. I lose consciousness and go into convulsions. When I wake up, I'm usually really weak and exhausted and very, very confused. I'll have several minutes of amnesia. Maybe my coworker blabbed or something. Who knows? So of course, I had a seizure at work. The next half an hour was a blur. I remember some things, but not a whole lot. I was too tired to walk home, and too out of it to call my mom for a ride, so who should volunteer but Glenn? I remember thinking, fuck, I'll be alone with Glenn. I can't fight back. I might not remember everything that happens. I wasn't really coherent enough to voice these thoughts, or protest much. My coworkers didn't object either. I kinda remember the car ride in flashes, then Glenn standing outside the doorway of my apartment and mentioning the stains in my living room carpet where I had once spilled some wine, and then offering to steam clean them for me. I muttered something and shut the door, and I remember locking it. I'm sure of it. I was relieved. I was pretty sure he hadn't made it past the doorway. I assumed, based on past experiences, that anyone in their right mind would find an epileptic seizure pretty damn unattractive. Maybe I'd even scared him away. I was sure that if Glenn had come into my apartment, or took advantage of me in some way, I would have remembered it too. Things got even weirder from there. The next day he asked me if he could write down what happened, so I could remember it better. And again, I saw his truck parked behind my apartment. He got out and started pacing erratically. Before I knew it, he was just shamelessly peering through the bushes and trees. He knew which balcony window was mine, and he looked right at me. He didn't even care that I could see him. He spent about an hour going from trying to look into my balcony window back to pacing. For the next couple of days, he kept coming back and just rapidly pacing. He'd walk between the same two light poles and the same path, while staring intently at the ground, again and again and again, for hours. Obviously, in some other world, I was beginning to freak out. I didn't know what to do, so I called my mom, and she called the police. They said they would go to his house and give him a warning. I told them not to contact the warehouse. Still, not wanting Glenn to lose his job. But they called anyways, probably my mom's doing. Glenn got fired, and I was relieved in the end. I thought it was finally over. Again, I was wrong. Then shit just started getting weirder. He showed up behind my apartment a few more times. Then he started leaving gifts in front of my door. Probably the most unsettling was when I found flowers and a sympathy card on the 6th anniversary of my dad's death. I had never even told him that my father died, but somehow he knew the exact date and year, and judging from the card, he knew every last detail of how it happened. I still have no idea of how he got that information, so finally, after ignoring him for several weeks, things seemed to die down. I was beginning to move on when I got a voicemail from Glenn, which turned out to be his wife, since apparently they share a phone. She said she wanted closure and needed to know what was happening. I was reluctant, and I thought she might blame me, and I just wanted to move on and forget this. But something about her voice made me change my mind. I swear, I've never heard such anguish in my life. I felt sorry for her and agreed. I told her the whole story and assured her that nothing happened between us and that Glenn started the whole thing and persisted even after I told him to stop. She was sympathetic to me and started to tell me what had been happening with Glenn, just when I thought things couldn't possibly get any more fucked up. She told me that at first, she noticed Glenn was stalking my Facebook page, as well as my entire family's pages. Then she decided to monitor his search history, and she said that he'd started talking to the search bars in Google, Facebook, and YouTube. What he typed was extremely specific and conversational, like he was responding to another human being based on what the searches brought up. Worse yet, he thought that I, personally, was using the search bars to communicate with him. He talked obsessively about how he was going to steam clean my living room carpet one day. He told her repeatedly that he was in love with me and that I loved him back. She had even said that he had gotten a tattoo of our initials and added me to his will. I wish I was kidding about that, but I'm not. Most unsettling, he still absolutely insists that he's been in my apartment. Maybe he broke in. Maybe he even came in after my seizure and I don't remember it. Even more unsettling, he asked YouTube, "Is having my baby?" That gave me chills, and it still does. Last I heard, they're still married. Glenn is receiving treatment and taking antipsychotic drugs. I still feel ashamed. I could be so dumb to trust him, not wanting to hurt his feelings. I feel guilty for not stopping this early on. Maybe if it weren't for me, none of this would have even happened. Or maybe Glenn would have eventually snapped in some other way, since he was maybe unstable to begin with. Who knows? I've since promised myself that I will always listen to my gut, and that I will never get myself into a situation like this again. I still never open my blinds and check the lot behind my apartment every night, just in case. This third and final story was submitted by a viewer named Sammy Ray. This all happened to me when I was in 7th grade. It was around February or March, and by then I had gotten comfortable in the area I lived in, and all the neighbors and the convenience store owners knew me and my family. My mom was asleep one night, and I had the bright idea at 3 o'clock in the morning to walk my dog named Bear, which was a little dog and couldn't provide me or himself much protection if anything were to happen. So I just walk a little down to the road to the left of me, quietly making sure not to wake any neighbors up. I walked just a little bit near the convenience store, just down the road from me, when, all of a sudden, a man appeared from the alley behind the stores. He approached me as if it was nothing, getting close to my face and checking my body up and down, and he said, "Hey, you're really cute." Being the polite person I was, and being 13 and 4'6" at the time, I looked at him with fear and quietly said, "Thank you." Might I add, This man looked to be in his 20s, maybe 22 or 23, and looked like he had been doing some very heavy drugs given the fact that he was twitching and his eyes looked bloodshot under the streetlights. He whispered something under his breath, though I couldn't hear, so I already knew something bad was probably going to happen. He walked maybe a foot towards me, and I got a bad vibe, so I said, "Oh, I have to go. I'll see you later." Slowly picking up my dog and speed walking. I already knew I couldn't go straight home because you could see where I lived from where he was standing, so I took another street, bolting it with my dog in my arms. I guess he had a friend and told him to go around the street I was going on because I finally got to the street and his friend started shouting at me. I couldn't really hear what he was saying, but it was along the lines of, "Hey you, cutie, come here." I was thinking, hell no, and ran, but so did he, right after me. I was full of fear, but also with adrenaline, and ran for my life. I ran out of his sight, back onto the road, still seeing the guy walking from before towards me, but he was maybe 6 houses down, so I hid in the darkness and walked to my house, ran inside and locked the doors. I wasn't about to call the police because I knew, if I did, I'd be in real trouble for being out so late. So I brushed it off. I texted my friend Corey, who was begging me to call the police, as she was worried for my safety. After about 5 minutes prior to what had happened, I heard loud talking, which sounded like 2 men from the neighbor's house. So being the nosy person I was, I looked outside the curtains, not revealing myself too much, but just enough to see the drug heap from before, sitting at the neighbor's house, the one right in front of my house. At this point, I was in tears thinking, now he knows where I live, he can come back at any time and kill me. I let go of the curtain, and the voices of the 2 men stopped after about 15 minutes, and they walked away, giving up I suppose. About 30 minutes later, my dad came home from the night shift, which relieved me. Because my dad could scare off mostly anyone because of how big he was, and how good of a fighter he was. Needless to say, I will never ever walk my dog again that early in the morning, and I will always tell my parents when I'll be walking the dog now. We've moved out of that house about 5 months ago to a whole different state. It still makes me panic to think about what would have happened if I didn't get uneasy around that man.